AMP2.tv presents Tell Us Your Business, where you're invited on the air to tell us what makes your business stand out in the community. It's important we hear from you to tell us all we need to know about what you do best. Tell Us Your Business uses the latest radio and television production systems, and all shows can be seen on AMP2.tv. If you have a question for our guest, call 888-565-1470. Now, let's get ready as our guest hits the airwaves and informs us about what we need to know on Tell Us Your Business.
You seem... Good evening, listeners. Thank you again for tuning in to the Balancing Life and Business Show with Norma G. Today, we have a Dr. Brent Schillinger. He is a MD and is a board-certified dermatologist practicing in Palm Beach County since 1983. He received his MD degree from Downstate Medical Center in Brooklyn, New York, where he went on to complete a residency program in dermatology. He is a past president of the Palm Beach County Medical Society and a founding member and past president of the Palm Beach County Medical Society Services Community Outreach Foundation. He has served as a chair of the Council of Ethical and Judicial Affairs for both the Palm Beach County Medical Society and the Florida Medical Association. Welcome, Dr. Schillinger. Thank you so much for being here.
Glad to be here, Norma.
So what we want to talk about today is just a couple hot topics and a couple things that you have that have been kind of pressing on you, and we just want to open up the subject. And so one of the first things I wanted to ask you is you recently moderated a panel of healthy aging for the Palm Beach County Medical Society Future of Medicine Summit. What is the best advice you can give for healthy aging?
Okay, that's a good question. Let me just tell you a little about the Future of Medicine. That is a summit that we've been hosting for the last 10 years. This was our 10th anniversary. Each year we kind of take a little bit different focus, and all the focuses have to do with people who live basically in Palm Beach County and what direction the future of medicine is going.
Okay.
This year, as you alluded to, the theme was healthy aging. We took a look at mind, body, and spirit.
Okay.
I actually was the moderator of the spirit portion of it.
Is that right?
And the point that I made, we had some great panelists.
Where was this? Where was
this? Was at the convention center up in West Palm Beach. We had about 500
Okay,
people
so it was here locally.
in attendance up there. And we had national speakers, local speakers. On the panel on spirituality, we had an interesting mix of panelists. We had a mindfulness guru. We had a cancer surgeon. We had a patient who survived very advanced melanoma, and we had a rabbi. So this kind of sounds like the premise for some type of off-color joke in a nightclub.
Okay.
But it really gave us some really interesting perspective. But to answer your question, the day focused on the different aspects. And when you look at healthy body, my take on that is the body is kind of like a slab of meat we drag around with us all day long,
Okay.
all of our life. And we need to kind of keep it in shape, but it's really just physical slab of meat.
So you're kind of looking at things I know I introduced you as a dermatologist, but you're just saying like the whole body as a whole we got to care for.
Oh, absolutely. As human beings, as physicians. So you got the body, then you got the mind. The mind is all that stuff going on in the brain area, all kinds of electrical and chemical impulses and stuff like that going on. Then when we get to the spiritual part, which I did my research on that.
Okay. What'd you find?
I found that that's the area where it kind of puts it all together. You know, you can have the best body and you can have all those neurons firing properly, but if your spirituality is not in the right focus, it's kind of like the rest of that stuff doesn't have quite the significance that it can have.
Well, that's really interesting because we spend a lot of time just focusing on the medical part of things, and you're saying that the spirituality component can also help in our aging process of healthy aging?
There's no question about that. There's been a lot of studies showing how, with mindfulness is kind of the term that we really focus on, paying attention to what's going on in the moment. A lot of times we're too concerned about what's happened in the past, and we're kind of depressed about what we didn't do, or we look into the future and we're kind of anxious about what we may not be able to do. But with a focus on the very present moment, it adds a different quality to our lives. And what was interesting in the panelists that we had on our group, particularly hearing from the cancer specialist, the cancer surgeon. And you think of surgeons as these guys with these knives that just cut and say, come in, go out. He's actually developed a whole program called prehabilitation. You've heard of rehabilitation.
Certainly have.
It's a whole new concept, prehabilitation. So patients with serious cancer, before they go in for the surgery, be it a couple of weeks or a month or so before, they have them prepare both nutritionally, physically, and spiritually. And they've done studies at a number of centers across the country already showing how those patients who go through these programs do much, much better in terms of their recovery.
Now, is this something that you have kind of, as you've practiced medicine for many years, that you've kind of come to this conclusion, or is this something that you're integrating currently into your practice? Are you able to do that with the patients that you have now?
Well, this is something
integrate any of those components
that I integrate into my life.
So more, a little bit personally.
What was interesting, my specialty, dermatology, tends to be an area of medicine where it's kind of like, you got a problem, come in, we'll take care of it, next. So you don't have the same type of connection that someone, say, in a family practice or internal medicine might have with the patient. But even in the shorter amount of time that I might be spending with people, I try to develop that connect.
Well, that's nice to hear coming from a doctor, because I know a lot of people out there say the doctor didn't look at me, didn't take his eye off the computer, or they move through a factory, one patient after another. So I'm sure that's very comforting, letting people know. And so there's probably people out there right now saying, well, how do I get a hold of this guy? If this is the type of bedside manner he has. Dr. Schillinger can be found at Dermatology Associates of the Palm Beaches. They're located, there's multiple practices within this your associate. But the one you work at primarily is in Delray?
In Delray Beach.
And they can be reached at 561-278-1362. And what I forgot to mention at the beginning of the hour is that you can find us on your AM radio at channel 1470. You can also find us at wwnnradio.com and AMP2 TV Productions on Facebook, and on your iHeartRadio app at AM 1470 WNN. If you have any questions for Dr. Schillinger, you can call in live at 1-888-565-1470. So I really just find this just very, very touching that you have kind of taken a little bit of a pause to self-reflect and see how you can improve your own personal healthy aging process, as well as see how you can incorporate that even in the short amount of time that you have with your patients. What type of preventative approaches, what's new in these areas, do you think that people can start to incorporate in their lives?
Okay, in terms of dermatology or just...
Either one.
Healthy living in general.
Healthy living in general.
There was a series of things that came out of the meeting in West Palm Beach, which was a couple of weeks ago. And a lot of these things are kind of obvious, but yet a lot of Americans are not doing it. Simple stuff that could make so many people so much more happier and healthier, but they're not paying attention. We're talking about things like diet, proper diet. The latest thinking, of course, is the high carbohydrate and high sugar is something we really need to take in consideration. But that's a whole nother show we can get into. All the manipulation of the sugar industry from like 30 years ago, saying that fat was the bad thing. Now we're kind of moving more in direction. Watch the sugars, have a little more olive oil, and don't overeat. So proper diet, which is a whole complex topic in itself, but that's important. Exercise is important. Even if you can just do 10 minutes of walking each day, something simple like that. There are some paradigms out there now as to what minimum amount of exercise you should be doing each week to maintain healthiness, but let's just leave it at there's a lot of people who aren't exercising at all, who hardly move around at all. Get in the car, go to this place, walk into this office, get back in the car. So that's important.
So I find this fascinating because perhaps someone might enter your office because they have some sort of skin condition. And you have now kind of said, I want to look at the mind, body, and spirit of my patients, not just, if you will, their body, their skin. And so just having that awareness that you have now, because patients come to you. They come to you for one reason, but you, because you're looking at them, may be able to see more than one problem that either they're aware of and they just kind of ignored it. But I like the fact that you may look at a patient and say, you know what? I see you're a little bit overweight, or I see that you're having difficulty getting up. tell me about, are you exercising? And so it's just refreshing to hear coming from a doctor that because people are so specialized in their practices that it's like, I don't deal with that. Go see the heart guy. I don't deal with that. Go see the orthopedic guy. So do you find yourself starting to kind of incorporate that a little bit?
Well, as a physician, it's really important to know your limitations. You're
Okay.
trained a certain amount in school, then you go into your specialty training, so you know your stuff. And I think one of the most important things for a doctor is to know what he or she doesn't know. And,
Sure.
this is one of the controversies. We have a lot of controversies out there in terms of physician extenders. There's a lot of movement in the direction of having nurse practitioners and physician's assistants kind of play the role of doctor. In fact, a lot of times you go to the doctor's office, you think you're seeing the doctor for all
and
these
you're
years, and you find out
seeing the
that wasn't
PA.
the doctor. That was just. Now, that's not to say that you're getting second-rate care, but in a number of instances, they don't have the same intensity of training. And the biggest problem isn't what they can't do, but it's when they don't recognize that, gee, that's a problem that I can't do, and I need to send this to someone who knows a little more than I do. And, of course, we have that problem with doctors. We all tend to have pretty big egos, so we think we can take care of everything. So I think advice for patients in physicians, whatever specialty or general medicine that you're dealing with, is to be comfortable with a doctor who knows his or her limitations.
Okay. Well, I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about skincare for a moment. And so, what is the best advice concerning sun exposure here in South Florida?
Okay, well,
because we certainly have a lot of that here in South Florida.
Not tonight, but
Not tonight.
we
Yeah,
have.
everyone, check your weather tonight, and everyone be safe and be prepared for.
Well, along with the healthy aging process, besides diet and exercise and avoiding too much alcohol and not smoking cigarettes, one of the things that allegedly we should have control over is our sun exposure.
Okay.
Too much time in the sun, there's no question, it can cause a lot of problems. And the biggest problem, of course, is skin cancer. There's different types of skin cancer, and some of them can be fatal. And if people aren't worried about skin cancer, it also can make you look old before your time.
Okay.
You see a 17-year-old girl who's tan head to toe, maybe looks pretty good. That same person, particularly if it's like blonde hair, blue eyes, keeps getting some by the time she's 40, she's going to look about 85. So just fear of aging too quickly is a good reason to be careful with the sun.
Okay.
Specifically, there's a few things you can do. Point is, most people live in Florida because they like the weather. So
Sure.
to stay inside and never go out is ridiculous to expect that. But moderation, I think we can approach this from a moderate area.
And is there a certain UV rating number that people should be using depending on
That
their
goes
skin?
along with some of the specific protective factors. First thing is to avoid exposure between 10 and 2. So if you can do something before 10 o'clock outdoors, after 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, that's going to be a lot better than the midday sun.
So 10 to 2 is the prime time hour to get the most burnt,
Right.
to get the most sun
To
exposure.
not be outside. So
Okay.
it's not to say don't do anything outdoors, but if you're going to be playing tennis or you're going to be exercising or running or swimming, whatever, if you can do it before 10 or after 2, 3 o'clock, that in itself is a plus.
Okay.
Second thing, you asked about the protective factors. These are the numbers that we see on the sunscreens.
Yes.
And of course, like everything, there's politics and controversy there. But my suggestion is anything that's at least the number 30 that you like the way it feels on your skin, you can use. Mm-hmm. Some people say, well, that one irritates and this one smells funny or it goes on. Then don't use that one. But there's enough products out there, you can kind of test them and see which one feels comfortable for you. Generally, the higher the number, the more protection. But it gets complicated because we have different types of rays, as you suggested. There's ultraviolet A, there's ultraviolet B, there's visible light, there's infrared light. And there's not any one sunscreen that really protects against every single thing. But generally speaking, the higher the number, the better. There's a lot of interest these days in the mineral-based sunscreens, the ones that have zinc, like zinc oxide or titanium dioxide in there. And that's more of a physical base and less of a chemical base. So some people think those are healthier. Interestingly enough, when we're treating patients who have discoloration on the skin, particularly, say, Hispanic skin, where there's a lot of brown spots on the face, we have found more recently that these physical blocks with the zinc and the titanium are actually more effective because they not only block the ultraviolet, but they block some of the visible light from the sun.
And
which
the
produces
mineral
it.
and the zincs, are they over the counter? Or can you
Yeah,
purchase
this
them
is
over
all
the
over
counter?
the counter. They're
Yeah,
over the
so it
counter.
gets promoted.
And one rule of thumb is don't think that you have to buy a more expensive product to get a better product.
Okay.
You can go to Costco and get the stuff by the case, and they usually have some pretty good things there. But if there's something that you like better than something else because it feels good, go ahead and use it. The third part of the
Yes,
answer to that
yes,
question,
yes.
protective clothing. And I've gotten to the point where I really think protective clothing is probably the most important thing. Because if you can stay in the shade, that's better than using a sunblock. That's better than going out early in the morning and getting out before the high sun is there. And by shade, hat with a big brim.
Okay.
Not just the
yes.
baseball cap that comes halfway
Yeah,
down
the
your
whole way
nose.
around.
Something that goes all the way
Okay.
around. That's a good thing. And there's a lot of stylish ones out
Well,
there.
you mentioned skin cancer, and
Yeah.
we have a guest on set today that I'd like to bring in at this point. And she has a couple questions for you regarding a condition that she's been diagnosed with that potentially may need surgery. So, Leanne, if you could go ahead and come on in. And come on in. Sure, just come on in. Dr. Schillinger, we have Leanne here.
Hello there, Leanne.
And so you have a couple questions for the doctor. Why don't you first, Leanne is going to be having Mohs surgery. And maybe just for our listeners out there, could you describe what Mohs surgery is in relationship to being diagnosed with skin cancer?
Well, first of all, there's different types of skin cancers.
Okay.
And then there's different ways of treating it. All right. And it depends on how advanced and depends on the location. You refer to Mohs surgery as a very specific type of surgery that lends itself very well to parts of the body where there's not very much extra tissue to play with. And I know you showed me or you mentioned to me that there's a little skin cancer growing right in the corner between your eye and
So she
upper part of your
she's been
nose.
diagnosed with basal cell carcinoma right near her tear duct.
Mm-hmm.
And she's very concerned about, well, you go ahead and ask your questions, Leanne, that you are.
So I'm going to have the Mohs, and then I'm going to go to the eye surgeon, and he said that possibly he would have to skin graft and do my eye.
Mm-hmm.
Put it over.
Well, from what I can see from here, okay, there's really very little area that's involved there. So it would be my speculation that they should be able to get that out without making a huge defect. Okay, so I don't think they're going to have to take apart half of your face from what I can see there. So I
Right.
really think probably they can get away with just taking
So
out
now,
a very little
when
bit.
people talk about Mohs surgery and basal cell carcinoma, my understanding is that this type of cancer has roots. And so she has commented that she's concerned that the roots, are they going to be near her ocular nerve or near her eye? And that's why
The tear duct.
she's wondering
specifically.
if do you think that's a possibility with that, or it's one of those things you don't know till you go in, how deep it is, because Mohs surgery implies that you scrape the skin, then you put it underneath the microscope and check to see if there's still cancer cells, and then if there is, then you keep scraping until you have none.
Yeah, actually, what it consists of is cutting a piece of skin out. So you visualize what looks like the limits of where the tumor extends, both on the edges and underneath. Take that little piece out, and then do what they call a frozen section. So you take a look at that immediately under the microscope to see if everything is out. And you mark the edges so you know if it was the right or the left or the bottom. And if everything's out, then you've done your job. If it says, no, there's still a little bit left over on the side there, then you go back and you take another little piece. And then you look at that piece. And if that says, gee, everything is out, then you know you've finished it. So it's a very specific way to take out only what you need to take out. The concept is, if you do it properly, that you'll have sparing of the tissue.
Right.
So it's a way to have probably less work done than if someone just looked at it and go, oh, well, I think it's here, so let's cut a really big piece out to make sure we have everything.
So is it absolute that she would have a skin graft?
That depends on how much tissue is removed. Okay.
Is that what one of the concerns you have?
Well, my concern is the healing process, whether I get Mohs or I get the skin grafting, because I've seen pictures. Obviously, I've done my research on this, and it is very
Is it the
gruesome,
hole?
I guess you
look
would
on the
say.
She's just
internet, you
concerned
look
about
at
the
pictures.
hole with the cotton ball.
When you
And-
look at some of the pictures online, it's a little scary.
Yes, it's very scary.
And it's one of those things where sometimes clinically it doesn't look like there's that much going on, but when they're looking under the microscope, it seems to extend to that point. So you might want to have that discussion before the surgery for them to be more on the conservative side. Say, look, if we had to go back later and take out more, maybe I'd rather do that. I don't want to have a huge hole there.
So basically, I should avoid sun afterwards forever?
That's a good question. Patients ask that all the time. The truth is, once the cancer is removed, it's probably not going to come back in that spot. Okay, it's the rest of your face, the rest of your body that had exposure to the sun.
Well, I'm the
that we have to be
blonde,
considerate.
blue-eyed girl you were talking about.
Exactly.
Yes, exactly.
So,
you-
it was fun and it looked really good
Yeah.
10 years ago when you were 17.
And I was
right?
the Hispanic girl
And
you were
she was the
talking about.
Hispanic girl.
So underneath
But I don't
that,
have brains, but no, I don't have brown spots. Not
no,
yet.
no manchas
a
and
couple,
lacata.
a couple of manchas.
Okay, underneath that thin
But
coat.
small.
Doesn't look like there's any. Okay.
Yeah.
But those are things that the sun can do. And that's why we go back to prevention is better than anything. To teach the kids, young kids in school. When I first moved here in the early 80s, and the type of patients that came in the 80s had these huge skin cancers at age 20, 25, where this big thing is growing out of their face because there was no education back in the 70s and the 60s about how important it was to avoid the sun. These days, while we still see a lot of cancer, we catch it very early, generally speaking. So
Okay.
it's rare to see the type of things that were showing up in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all because of education and people following those rules. And the third part that I didn't finish before, besides get yourself a big hat
Okay.
and lightweight long sleeves, okay, and lightweight long pants. There's some fabulous fabrics out there.
That are real
Columbia
lightweight.
Sportswear
Yes.
is one of the companies that just makes some really terrific things. And they look good and they feel good. And if you're going to be outside for a couple of hours, you're going to be on a boat, you can be at the beach, whatever, not a bad idea to take that approach.
Sure,
It's just going
sure.
to look much better in the long run.
Yeah.
And so, do you have any other questions for Dr. Schillinger regarding that?
I think that'll do it. Thank you so much. Oh, the cream, if you want to elaborate on that. There's a cream.
Well, there's
Yes.
different types of creams that we use for precancerous lesions to help eliminate those, and different types of creams for certain very superficial skin
Okay,
cancers.
sure,
So there's just
sure.
there's a lot of if we have
Yeah.
a couple of hours, there's a lot of
Absolutely.
different approaches.
So now, when we discussed before, we talked about a couple, changing gears a little bit, a couple hot topics that are out there in the public right now, and one of them being about the EpiPen. And EpiPen there's this whole thing with the government and the CEO of the EpiPen manufacturer regarding price gouging. What are your comments and thoughts on that?
I just wrote an editorial about that for a blog site that we do, the Medical Society, which we might mention. People take a look at that one.
What is it again?
It's Palm Beach County Medical Society.
Okay.
You go to that website.
Palm
and
Beach
then-
County Medical
then
Society.
you click Future of Medicine blog,
Okay, we can find your blog there.
and I have one on medical ethics.
Okay.
So there's just a lot of hot topics these days. But the EpiPen kind of is the bad boy, poster boy, the latest one for some of the activity that's going on in the pharmaceutical industry. EpiPen, and what's really interesting is I know, and again, if you had about 5 hours, we could talk about what's
Sure.
going on in the industry. I knew
About
that,
5 minutes, but
okay, the EpiPen price went way up because a patient of mine just a few months ago said, could I have a prescription for, I don't have insurance. And I gave him a prescription and a discount card. He goes, even with the discount card, it was $540 for something that used to be $50.
wow.
And the latest thing, though, that they're doing is they're actually going and trying to apply for status so that you don't have to have a copay or a deductible when you go in to get this medicine. Trouble is, they're not lowering their price. They're not lowering their price.
Did they come to any type of resolution? Because I know
No,
they went
haven't.
to
That's the interesting
it's
thing.
still
This
at
is
the
a
beginning.
hot story in the news. The lady who is the CEO, who I think had a salary of about $18 million last year, she was pretty bold, and she went on television and she goes, "Well, we're going to come out with a generic equivalent for $300," but none of that made a lot of sense.
It's still very
They're
expensive.
actually doing some stuff now to try to raise the price, but they give out these cards that'll reimburse you for your co-payment. Okay, but it costs a lot of money for whoever's paying it.
Let's clarify to the listener, an EpiPen is used for what again?
It's used for allergic reactions, for what we call anaphylactic reactions. So like you're allergic to a bee sting or strawberries and suddenly you can't breathe, you got that in your pocket, you hit yourself with that.
So that seems like we need to continue to follow that story a little bit because, for people who do have life and death allergic reactions to certain things, a $600 pen is kind of outrageous, because allergies are impartial to rich or poor. And so to have a $600 pen just seems just kind of unfair.
But it's totally legal. We're a capitalist country. Everybody wants to make money. So I think it's one of those areas where people are going to need to agree there needs to be some sort of government regulation because it's just totally absurd. And the reason it even came into focus is because with a lot of the new policies, these Obamacare, affordable health care policies, particularly in Florida, we're finding a lot of people have these high deductibles, $2,500, $5,000 deductibles. So when all the parents were going to stock up on the EpiPens because their kids are going back to school last month, that's when they found out the prices. Oh my gosh, it's going to cost me $600. So that was the outrage, and only thing the company is doing is trying to stick that back into the insurance company.
Sure. Well, Dr. Schillinger, it just seems like we didn't even get to a lot of the topics that we wanted to talk to. You have a wealth of knowledge regarding a lot of policies and a variety of subjects, and so I'd love to talk and spend more time with you again. Thank you again, listeners, for tuning in for the Balancing Life and Business Show with Norma G. You can listen to us on the AM Radio 1470 and at AMP2 TV Productions and WWNNradio.com. And again, if you'd like to reach Dr. Schillinger, he can be reached at 561-278-1362 at Dermatology Associates of Palm Beaches. Thanks again, and we will be back next week. Have a great evening, everyone.
This has been Tell Us Your Business, where a special guest comes on every week and tells us what they do. All shows can be seen on amp2.tv, and if you wish to be a guest, call 866-224-5422 and tell us about your business. That's 866-224-5422. This has been an amp2.tv production. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.